The water is cold. 40 feet down, visibility drops to less than 10 feet. Sarah Chen sweeps her metal detector across the harbor floor in slow, methodical arcs. The device chirps. Another signal. Probably another fuel tank. Another piece of corroded junk destined for the scrapyard. She's done this 1,000 times. Her sister Michelle swims closer, flashlight cutting through the murk. They've been working this abandoned naval harbor for 3 months now, pulling up whatever metal the Navy left behind when they closed the facility in 1962. It's honest work. Hard work. The kind that pays bills but rarely surprises. Sarah clears away sediment with her gloved hand. The silt clouds the water, forcing her to work by touch. Metal. Definitely metal. Big. She brushes more aggressively, revealing a curved surface. Then she sees it. Stenciled letters, faded but unmistakable. U.S. Navy. Below that, another marking. Fairbanks, Morse. Michelle's light finds the lettering. Even through her mask, Sarah can see her sister's eyes widen. This isn't scrap. This is history. They surface together, breaking into the gray morning air. The harbor is silent, except for the slap of small waves against the dock pilings. Sarah pulls her regulator out. Did you see what I saw? Michelle nods, breathing hard. Fairbanks Morse. That's submarine engines. Grandpa's engines. Their grandfather served in the submarine service during the 1950s. He died when they were teenagers, taking most of his stories with him. He kept one photograph on his dresser, himself in dress whites, standing in front of massive machinery in a cramped metal room. He never explained what the machinery was, never talked about what he did down there in the deep. Now, 60 years later, they might be touching the same metal he touched. Sarah hauls herself onto the dock, water streaming from her wetsuit. We need to document this before we do anything else. Get measurements, photographs, serial numbers if we can find them. We need an expert, Michelle says. Someone who knows these engines. Sarah thinks about this. An expert means complications. Means maybe not being able to sell it. Means the scrap value of 30,000 pounds of bronze and steel might slip through their fingers. But Michelle is right. They need to know what they've found. There's that guy, Michelle continues. The one who runs the Maritime Museum volunteer program. Frank something, Navy veteran. He worked on submarines. Frank Morrison. Sarah has seen him around town, always wearing a USS Permit ball cap. Always ready to talk about the old boats if anyone asks. Most people don't ask. Call him, Sarah says. Frank Morrison's hands shake slightly as he holds the photographs. Not from age, though he's 76. From recognition. He knows this engine, not just the model. This specific engine. That's a 38D818A, he says quietly. 10-cylinder opposed piston diesel. Fairbanks Morse built them from 1938 through the early 60s. This one looks like it came from a Tench-class boat, maybe a Balau. Hard to tell from the photos. They're sitting in Sarah's kitchen, the photographs spread across the table like evidence at a crime scene. Frank picks up each image, studies it, sets it down with care. Can you tell us anything else? Michelle asks. Frank leans back. His eyes have that distant look veterans get when they're seeing something that isn't in the room. These engines, he begins, they were the heart of the fleet submarine. 1,600 horsepower each. Most boats carried 4 of them, 2 for propulsion, 2 for charging batteries. They could push a boat at 20 knots on the surface. Underwater, you ran on batteries, but these engines kept you alive, kept you moving, kept you fighting. He taps one photograph showing the engine's corroded exterior. The engineering was overbuilt. Had to be. You're running machinery in a steel tube that might have to dive to 400 feet. Depth charges going off around you. Pressure trying to crush every seal, every gasket. These engines couldn't just run. They had to run perfectly, every time, or men died. Sarah watches him. She's starting to understand why Michelle wanted to call him. What's an opposed piston design? She asks. Frank's face brightens. This is his language. Most engines have 1 piston per cylinder, moving up and down. At the top, you've got a cylinder head with valves. Complicated. Lots of parts that can fail. Fairbanks Morse did something different. They put 2 pistons in each cylinder, moving toward each other from opposite ends. No cylinder head, no valves. When the pistons meet in the middle, compression happens. Fuel ignites. Pistons push apart. Simple, reliable, brilliant. He stands up, gesturing with his hands to demonstrate the motion. 2 crankshafts, one at each end of the engine connected by gears. When one piston goes in, the other comes out. Perfect balance. These engines could run for thousands of hours between overhauls. I've seen them take direct hits from shrapnel and keep running. Michelle glances at Sarah. There's a question neither of them has asked yet. Frank sees it. He's been waiting for it. You want to know if it still works, he says. It's been underwater for 60 years, Sarah replies. That's impossible, right? Frank sits back down. He picks up the photograph showing the engine's nameplate. Probably impossible, he admits. Salt water is brutal. Corrosion gets into everything. But these engines were built different. Chrome-plated cylinder walls, bronze fittings, stainless steel where it mattered. And that opposed piston design means the cylinders are horizontal. Water might have drained out over time instead of pooling. He looks at both sisters. I'd like to see it. In person. If you're willing. Sarah thinks about the scrap value. $3,000, maybe more. Enough to cover 2 months of expenses. But she looks at Michelle, sees the expression on her face and knows the decision has already been made. Tomorrow morning, she says. Bring tools. The engine sits in 20 feet of water now. They've rigged a floating work platform above it, a makeshift dock built from salvaged lumber and empty barrels. Frank kneels at the edge, peering down through the clear water at the machinery below. I need to touch it, he says. He's too old to dive safely, but Sarah and Michelle have brought up detailed measurements, rubbings of the serial numbers, samples of the corrosion. Frank studies everything like an archaeologist examining artifacts. Serial number puts it at 1947 manufacture, he says. That narrows it down. Probably USS Tiru, SS-416, Tench class. She was commissioned in 1948, served as a training boat through the 50s, decommissioned in 1960. They scrapped her right here in this harbor. He runs his finger along the rubbing of the nameplate. I trained on Tiru, he says quietly. 1966. They'd reactivated her for a few years to handle overflow from the submarine school. I was 20 years old. Thought I knew everything. The chief engineer taught me different. Michelle sits down beside him. What was it like, working on these engines? Frank considers the question. Most people don't really want to know. They want the sanitized version, the movie version. But these women are different. They've got their hands dirty. They've touched the same metal he touched. Hot, he says. Engine room could hit 120 degrees. Loud. You wore hearing protection, but it didn't help much. The smell was diesel fuel, oil, sweat, and ozone from the electrical systems. You learned to move in tight spaces. Everything was close. You could reach out and touch 3 different systems at once. He pauses. But when those engines were running right, when everything was synchronized and balanced, there was a rhythm to it. A sound. You could hear if something was wrong before any gauge showed it. The old chiefs, they could diagnose problems just by listening. It was like music to them. Sarah has been quiet, but now she speaks. Our grandfather served on submarines. We don't know which ones. He never talked about it. Frank looks at her. What was his name? James Chen. He was a machinist's mate. Frank's expression changes. He stands up, walks to his truck, returns with a worn notebook. He flips through pages covered in cramped handwriting. James Chen, he reads. Machinist's mate, 2nd class. He was on Tiru when I trained there. He's the one who taught me how to time the fuel injectors. The silence that follows is profound. He was good, Frank continues. Patient. Didn't yell like some of the other chiefs. He showed you how to do something once, watched you do it twice, then trusted you to do it right. That's rare. Michelle's voice is thick. He never told us any of this. A lot of the old submariners didn't talk, Frank says. What we did, where we went, it was classified. Even after it wasn't classified anymore, the habit stuck. You kept your mouth shut. You did your job. You came home. He closes the notebook. But your grandfather, he was proud of this work. I could tell. The way he maintained these engines, the way he taught us to respect the machinery. He knew these engines kept us alive. Every seal, every bearing, every adjustment mattered. Frank looks down at the submerged engine. I want to try something, he says. Probably crazy. Probably impossible. But I want to try to turn the crankshaft. Sarah frowns. Why? Because if we can turn it, even manually, it means the pistons aren't seized. Means the engineering was good enough to survive 60 years underwater. Means your grandfather's work, and the work of thousands of men like him, meant something permanent. He meets her eyes. And because I want to hear that sound one more time. The preparation takes a week. Frank brings tools Sarah has never seen before. Custom wrenches sized for Navy spec fittings, bronze hammers that won't spark, pressure gauges calibrated for submarine systems. They work in shifts, Sarah and Michelle diving to access the engine while Frank directs from the platform above. First, they drain the cylinders. Frank has fabricated a hand pump from salvaged parts, and they thread it into each cylinder's indicator cock. Seawater comes out brown with rust, but it comes out. That's promising. If the cylinders were cracked, we couldn't build pressure, Frank explains. The fact that we can pump them means the castings are intact. Next comes penetrating oil. Gallons of it. They pour it into every opening, every joint, every bearing surface they can access. The oil is expensive, cutting into the potential profit from scrapping the engine. Sarah doesn't mention this. Michelle has stopped talking about money entirely. Frank teaches them about the opposed piston design as they work. He sketches diagrams on waterproof paper, explaining how the two crankshafts must move in perfect synchronization. The lower crankshaft is the one we'll try to turn, he says. It's geared to the upper shaft. If we can rotate the lower, the upper should follow. If it doesn't, the gears are stripped and we're done. He shows them where to attach the breaker bar, a 6-foot length of steel pipe that will give them leverage. The crankshaft bolt is massive, designed to be torqued to specifications that require specialized tools. They'll be turning it backward, against compression, using nothing but human strength and mechanical advantage. It's going to take all three of us, Frank says, and it might not work. Probably won't work, but we have to try. On the fourth day, they're ready. The engine has been soaking in penetrating oil for 72 hours. Frank has calculated the optimal position for the breaker bar. They've rigged a safety system to prevent the bar from slipping and injuring someone. Sarah dives first, positioning herself at the crankshaft. Michelle follows, taking a position where she can add her strength. Frank, despite his age, insists on diving too. Sarah tries to argue, but he's already pulling on his wetsuit. I'm old, he says. I'm not dead, and I'm not missing this. Underwater, communication is limited to hand signals and the occasional knock on metal. Frank positions himself at the breaker bar, wraps both hands around it and looks at Sarah. She nods. They pull. Nothing happens. They pull harder. Sarah feels her muscles strain. The bar flexes slightly, but the crankshaft doesn't move. 60 years of corrosion has welded metal to metal. Frank signals to surface. They ascend slowly, following proper decompression protocols. More oil, Frank says when they're back on the platform. More time. We're asking a lot from this machinery. They apply more penetrating oil. They wait. They try again the next day. Still nothing. Sarah can see frustration building in Frank. This matters to him in a way she's only beginning to understand. This isn't about the engine. It's about proving something. About honoring something. On the 6th day, Michelle notices it first. A slight movement. Not rotation. Just a microscopic shift. She signals frantically. Sarah and Frank add their strength. The breaker bar moves 1 inch, 2 inches. Then with a groan that travels through the water like a whale song, the crankshaft rotates. 15 degrees, 30, 60. The pistons inside the cylinders begin to move, pushing against compression that shouldn't exist after 6 decades underwater. The gears connecting the two crankshafts engage, and the upper shaft begins to turn in synchronization with the lower. They rotate the crankshaft 180 degrees before it binds again. But that's enough. That's everything. When they surface, Frank is crying. He doesn't try to hide it. She's got compression, he says. After 60 years underwater, she's still got compression. The rings are sealing. The bearings are intact. The gears are meshed. He pulls himself onto the platform, sits with his legs dangling in the water. Do you understand what this means? The tolerances on these engines were measured in thousandths of an inch. The machining had to be perfect. Your grandfather and men like him maintained these engines to standards that seem impossible today. And it worked. It actually worked. Sarah sits beside him. She's exhausted, her muscles trembling from the effort. But she feels something else too. Pride, connection, purpose. What do we do now? She asks. Frank wipes his eyes. Now we find out where this engine belongs. The research takes 2 weeks. Frank contacts the Naval History and Heritage Command, provides the serial numbers, and waits. The response comes via email, A scanned document from the archives. USS Tiru, SS-416. Tench-class submarine. Keel laid in 1944. Commissioned in 1948. Service history includes training operations, Cold War patrols, and experimental work with early sonar systems. Decommissioned in 1960. Briefly reactivated from 1965 to 1968 for training purposes, then finally scrapped at this harbor in 1969. The engine Sarah and Michelle found is number 3, the starboard auxiliary engine. According to the maintenance logs, it was overhauled in 1957 by a crew that included machinist mate second class James Chen. Frank prints the documents and brings them to the sisters. They read in silence. There's more, Frank says. He opens his own records, pages he's kept for 50 years. I found the training roster from 1966. Your grandfather was my instructor for engine maintenance. I have his signature right here, certifying that I was qualified to perform overhauls. He shows them the page. The signature is faded but legible. James Chen, MM2. I remember one day, Frank continues, we were working on this exact engine. Number 3. There was a problem with the fuel injection timing. Your grandfather spent 6 hours diagnosing it. Turned out to be a worn cam follower, a part about the size of your thumb. He showed me how to measure the wear, how to calculate if it was within tolerance or needed replacement. He said something I never forgot. Frank pauses, remembering. He said, this little part, it doesn't look important, but if it fails, the engine fails. If the engine fails, the boat can't run. If the boat can't run, men die. So we don't accept almost good enough. We accept perfect. Michelle is crying now. He never talked about any of this at home. We thought he just fixed things. We didn't know. He fixed things that mattered, Frank says. He fixed things that kept men alive in the most hostile environment on Earth. That's not just a job. That's a calling. Sarah has been thinking. The scrap value of this engine is roughly $3,000, maybe $4,000 if they find the right buyer. That money would help. Business has been slow, but she knows what needs to happen. We should donate it, she says, to a museum. Somewhere people can see it. Somewhere they can understand what it meant. Michelle nods immediately. Frank looks at both of them. You're sure? That's a lot of money to walk away from. Sarah thinks about her grandfather standing in that engine room, his hands covered in grease, adjusting a cam follower the size of a thumb because perfect was the only acceptable standard. She thinks about Frank, 76 years old, crying in the water, because a machine remembered what it was supposed to do. It's not a lot of money, she says, not compared to what it represents. Frank makes the calls. The Submarine Force Museum in Groton, Connecticut expresses immediate interest. They send a curator, a woman named Dr. Patricia Hendricks, who specializes in Cold War naval technology. She arrives 3 days later with a team of preservation specialists. Dr. Hendricks kneels on the floating platform, examining the engine through the clear water. She takes notes, photographs, measurements. Finally, she surfaces from her own dive and removes her mask. This is extraordinary, she says. We have Fairbanks Morse engines in the collection, but none that have been documented in situ like this, and none that demonstrate functional compression after this length of submersion. She looks at Frank. You're the one who got it to turn? We all did, Frank says, gesturing to Sarah and Michelle. But yes, I directed the effort. I'd like you to consult on the extraction and restoration, Dr. Hendricks says. We'll pay standard consulting rates. And I want to document your connection to this specific engine. That's part of the story. She turns to Sarah and Michelle. The museum will cover all extraction costs. We'll bring in a crane barge, proper lifting equipment. We'll do this right, and we'll create a display that tells the complete story, the engineering, the service history, and the recovery. Your names will be on the plaque. Your grandfather's name will be on the plaque. Sarah feels something release in her chest, a tension she didn't know she was carrying. When? She asks. 2 months. We need to prepare the display space and arrange the logistics. But we'll make this happen. The extraction takes 3 days. A crane barge arrives from New London, operated by a crew that specializes in maritime salvage. They work with the precision of surgeons, attaching lifting straps to structural points Frank identifies. The engine weighs 30,000 pounds. Lifting it wrong could destroy it. Sarah and Michelle dive repeatedly, guiding the straps into position, ensuring nothing snags on debris. Frank watches from the barge, directing operations with hand signals and radio calls. On the 3rd day, The engine breaks the surface. Water streams from every opening, cascading back into the harbor. In the sunlight, the corrosion looks worse than it did underwater. The bronze fittings have turned green. The steel components are covered in rust scale, but the fundamental structure is intact. The crane operator lowers it onto a custom-built cradle. Frank approaches slowly, running his hand along the crankcase. He finds a spot near the lower crankshaft, a place where the paint has worn away from repeated contact. "I touched this spot," he says quietly. 58 years ago. Right here. I was adjusting the main bearing clearance. Your grandfather was watching, making sure I did it right." He looks at Sarah and Michelle. "He would have been proud of you. Both of you. You didn't take the easy money. You did the right thing." Michelle wipes her eyes. "We learned that from him, even if he never said it out loud." The restoration takes 6 months. The museum's conservation team works carefully, removing corrosion without damaging original surfaces. They don't try to make the engine look new. That would erase the history. Instead, they stabilize it, preserve it, present it as it is. A machine that served, that survived, that remembered. Frank visits weekly, consulting on technical details. He identifies modifications made during specific overhauls. He points out wear patterns that tell stories about how the engine was operated. He becomes part of the museum's volunteer staff, giving tours to visitors who want to understand what they're seeing. Sarah and Michelle attend the dedication ceremony. The engine is displayed in a climate-controlled gallery mounted on a platform that allows visitors to walk around it. Interpretive panels explain the opposed piston design, the service history of USS Tiru, and the recovery operation. One panel features a photograph of James Chen in his dress whites, standing in an engine room. Beside it, a photograph of Sarah, Michelle, and Frank on the floating platform, the day they first turned the crankshaft. The caption reads, "3 generations connected by engineering excellence and dedication to duty." There's an interactive element too, a replica crankshaft that visitors can turn, feeling the resistance of compression, understanding the mechanical advantage required. Children try it, veterans try it, engineers try it. Most can't turn it more than a few degrees. During the dedication speech, Dr. Hendricks explains the significance. This engine represents a pivotal moment in naval history, the transition from World War II technology to Cold War capabilities, the bridge between diesel boats and nuclear submarines. But more than that, it represents the men who maintained these machines, men like James Chen, who understood that perfection wasn't optional, it was survival. She gestures to Sarah and Michelle, and it represents the people who refuse to let history become scrap metal, who understand that some things are worth more than their weight in bronze and steel. After the ceremony, an elderly man approaches Frank. He's wearing a USS Tiru ball cap. "I served on Tiru," the man says, 1958 to 1960. "I was an electrician's mate, but I spent a lot of time in the engine room. That sound when those engines were running, I can still hear it." Frank shakes his hand. "I know exactly what you mean." They stand together, looking at the engine. 2 old men remembering when they were young and the machines were alive. 6 months after the dedication, Sarah receives a letter. It's from a woman named Grace Chen Martinez, postmarked from San Diego. The letter is handwritten, the script careful and precise. "Dear Ms. Chen, I saw the article about the submarine engine recovery in the Naval Institute proceedings. I recognize the name James Chen. He was my father. I believe he was your grandfather. I'm writing because I have something you should see." Sarah calls the number included in the letter. Grace answers on the second ring. "I never knew my father well," Grace explains. "He and my mother divorced when I was young. He remarried, had your mother, started a new family. We stayed in touch, but not close. When he died, his second wife sent me a box of his things. I've kept it all these years, not sure what to do with it." "What's in the box?" Sarah asks. "His service records, photographs, and a journal. He kept a journal during his time on submarines. I've never shown it to anyone. I wasn't sure if I should, but after reading about what you did, about how you honored that engine, I think you should have it." The box arrives 2 weeks later. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, is a leather-bound journal. The pages are yellowed, the ink faded, but the writing is legible. James Chen's handwriting, the same signature Frank had in his training records. Sarah and Michelle read it together, sitting at the same kitchen table where they first looked at photographs of the engine. The journal entries are technical mostly. maintenance procedures, equipment modifications, problem-solving notes. But between the technical entries there are glimpses of the man. June 15, 1957. Completed overhaul of number 3 engine. Replaced cam followers, adjusted timing, tested compression. Everything within spec. Morrison asked me why we spend so much time on details that probably don't matter. Told him every detail matters. Told him about the time number 2 engine lost a fuel pump at depth. We were running on 3 engines trying to surface, and number 3 had to be perfect. It was perfect. We made it home. Details matter. Another entry, dated December 1958. New kid in the engine room today. Scared. They're all scared at first. The noise, the heat, the knowledge that you're in a steel tube under hundreds of feet of water. Told him what my first chief told me. Trust the engineering. Trust your training. Trust your crew. The fear doesn't go away, but you learn to work through it. And one more, dated March 1960, just before USS Tiru was decommissioned. Last day on the boat. Walked through the engine room one final time. Touched each engine, said goodbye. Sounds crazy, but these machines kept us alive. They deserve respect. They deserve to be remembered. Hope someone remembers them when I'm gone. Michelle's voice breaks. He wanted this. He wanted someone to remember. Sarah closes the journal carefully. We did. We remembered. Frank Morrison dies 2 years after the engine dedication. He's 78. The funeral is well attended. Family, friends, veterans from 3 different submarine crews. Sarah and Michelle attend, sitting in the back row, listening to people talk about Frank's service, his dedication, his knowledge. At the reception, Frank's daughter approaches them. He talked about you two constantly, she says. About the engine recovery. About your grandfather. He said it was the most important thing he'd done in years. Made him feel like his service mattered. Like the work he did wasn't forgotten. She hands them a small wooden box. He wanted you to have this. Inside the box is a brass bearing from a Fairbanks Morse 38D818 engine. It's polished to a mirror shine. A note, in Frank's handwriting, is tucked beneath it. From USS Tiru, Engine Room 1966. Removed during overhaul. Kept as a reminder that good engineering lasts. Thank you for proving me right. Frank. Sarah holds the bearing. It's heavy, solid, perfectly machined. She can see her reflection in the polished surface. We should give this to the museum, Michelle says. Sarah nods. With a new plaque. Frank's story needs to be part of the display. The museum adds the bearing to the exhibit. The new plaque reads, "This bearing was removed from USS Tiru's number 3 engine during a 1966 overhaul by machinist's mate James Chen and engine man Frank Morrison. It was preserved for 57 years as a testament to engineering excellence. Donated by Sarah Chen and Michelle Chen in memory of Frank Morrison, who taught us that some things are built to last forever." Visitors touch the bearing. It's encouraged. The museum wants people to feel the weight, the smoothness, the precision. They want people to understand that this isn't just metal. It's craftsmanship. It's dedication. It's history you can hold in your hand. Sarah visits the exhibit once a year, always on her grandfather's birthday. She stands in front of the engine looking at the photographs, reading the plaques. Sometimes other visitors ask her questions. She tells them about the recovery, about Frank, about the day they turned the crankshaft and heard a sound that had been silent for 60 years. One year, a young woman approaches her. She's wearing a Navy uniform, submarine warfare insignia on her chest. "I'm an engineer on a Virginia-class boat," the woman says. "Nuclear-powered. Completely different technology. But I come here every time I'm in port. I need to see this engine. I need to remember that the work I do, the maintenance, the attention to detail, it's part of a tradition. It matters." Sarah smiles. It does matter. It always has. The young officer touches the engine's crankcase. The same spot Frank touched. The same spot James Chen touched 70 years ago. "Thank you for saving this," she says. "Thank you for not letting it become scrap." After she leaves, Michelle joins Sarah in front of the display. "Do you ever regret it?" Michelle asks. "The money we could have made?" Sarah thinks about this. $3,000, maybe 4, enough to cover expenses for a few months. Gone now, transformed into something that can't be measured in currency. "No," she says. "Not even once." They stand together in silence. Two sisters who found a piece of history at the bottom of a harbor and chose to honor it instead of profit from it. Around them, visitors move through the gallery, reading plaques, taking photographs, touching the bearing, trying to turn the replica crankshaft. The engine sits in its climate-controlled case, preserved but not pristine. The corrosion is still visible, the wear patterns are still evident, the history is still present. And somewhere in the metal, in the precisely machined surfaces and carefully maintained components, the work of James Chen and Frank Morrison and thousands of men like them continues to speak. It says, "We built this to last. We maintained it to perfection. We trusted our lives to it, and it never let us down." 60 years underwater couldn't silence that message. Corrosion couldn't erase it. Time couldn't diminish it. Some things are built to last forever. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Some history is worth more than scrap. Sarah and Michelle learned this in 40 feet of cold water, their hands on rusted metal that still remembered what it was supposed to do. They learned it from Frank Morrison, who cried when a machine proved him right. They learned it from their grandfather, who wrote in a journal that details matter, that engineering deserves respect, that someone should remember. They remembered. And now, standing in a museum where thousands of people will see the engine and hear the story, they know the remembering will continue long after they're gone. That's worth more than any amount of money. That's worth everything. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button, drop a like if this story moved you, and leave a comment. Tell us about the toughest machine you've ever brought back to life. We read every single one.